Hi, I'm Matt Pachilli. Tonight, as our team in the studio is sharing coverage and commentary on the elections and ballots across the Commonwealth, I have the pleasure of sharing a handful of stories and perspectives on America's great leap of faith from the Virginia Museum of History and Culture and their exhibit on democracy. Let's take a look.
American Democracy is an exhibit that was organized by the Smithsonian as a traveling exhibition. And we felt that it was important to bring this exhibit to Richmond and to Central Virginia. The origin stories of our democracy have strong roots in Virginia. But also we live in a time, and I think we'll always live in a time, where our democracy is a work in progress.
I think that we as historians are always very interested in the story of how American democracy has evolved over the course of our nation's history. And this was an exhibition that dealt with a lot of those key issues.
I think the exhibit as a whole tells us just how far we've come and encourages us to think about how much further we have to go to complete that great leap of faith. The democratic experiment stays an experiment because it is ever evolving, ever changing. And I think that that's one of the important keys of democracy, is to never be satisfied with what we have. Because as we continue to bring people into the conversation, they will bring in their experiences. And as they bring in their experiences, we should adjust and change the actual systems of democracy so that they can fully participate. That's what this exhibit shows, how as more people have gotten involved with the franchise, more people have been able to change it so that they can feel and be represented in it. I don't think that the experiment ends. I think that it continues as we continue to evolve.
And there's 4 remaining themes of the exhibit that we'll be exploring throughout the evening with the help of museum and election officials from Henrico County who share their perspective and experience on this great experiment that is our American democracy. As you make your way into the exhibit and democracy itself, the next step is the idea of a vote, meaning a voice in legislation, leadership, and governance. The idea of who actually gets to vote, though, has been an issue since the 18th century, and one our nation has taken to the streets and the polls.
Democracy, from its very roots, has usually been limited, and we still limit it today. We limit democracy by age. We limit democracy by citizenship. But initially, the idea of democracy had started out as landed property owners, specifically white men. And then, over time, it became more expansive.
If you look at the countries that do not have democracies, their turnout's 100%, all for one candidate, right? Here we're at, a good election is 75%. People choose to come to the vote or choose not to come to vote, depending on the year, but we're here for them, and we have the ballots for them. And their neighbors are there working the polls for you, for your right to vote.
It is a great sense of accomplishment when you conduct an election and you realize how many people you are connecting with in the community. And that's one of the things I love about the work that we do. We set up, whether it's for election day or for early voting or for by mail, we're here with our doors open, ready to serve the public. And when you take a step back from that and you realize that this is the way our elected leaders come into office and the transfer of power, and that you were a small part of it, it's very rewarding.
This exhibit does an amazing job of showing the complexity of American democracy. It's really nice to have this gallery and this exhibit to remind the folks in these citizenship classes, and then also just students and the general public who come through, that American democracy has always been something we're debating over. And so that's why it's so important to go out and vote and be a part of American democracy, because you can then be a part of that debate.
That informal process of democracy that many live out every day through political parties and campaigns are part of what make up the machinery of democracy. And today, it's into those elaborate campaigns that shape so much of the public conversation about our candidates. Campaigns that play out on social media, as our RTD colleague Luca Powell explains.
Most recently, I've been working on a project looking at how the different congressional candidates in very competitive races in Virginia are using places and platforms like Facebook and Instagram to do last-minute pushes to voters. These are races that matter a lot to the country, but also to folks in Virginia who are watching candidates kind of change from being, over the past 10 years, being people who spoke about local issues like, the Navy in coastal Virginia, or issues in schools in Richmond, to people who are very focused on talking about national issues that are being now become the centerpiece of the conversation in Virginia. And also on how ads are being bought by big groups from Washington, D.C., so we call them PACs, and they're entirely unaccountable, but they're able to freewheelingly spend money on ads to either denigrate or prop up their candidate of choice. What's interesting about Facebook is that there's not really someone editing those ads, and they're also, the way that they're being shown to people is distinct from if you buy an ad on a channel on a TV show, for example. You can target people based on the show, but with Facebook ads, you can target people based on what they like, based on where they live, based on their age and their gender. So you're getting politicians that are able to show messages to people based off of what they think that population wants to see in a more specific way than they've ever seen before. And that's something that's been common in the last couple of election cycles, but here it is again, and I think it's our job to show how it's going down in 2022. We don't know what the payoff is for an ad or an impression, which is how they market ads to buyers, candidates who buy these ads. How many impressions can you get? Can you get 1,000? Can you get 5,000? And they're cheap too, so that's one of the points of the reasons why they're being bought as opposed to a TV ad, is because for $300 I can show 1,000 people in my district this ad accusing my opponent of being a congressional profiteer, and that's occurred in the past 2 months. That's occurred in coastal Virginia, so that's a pretty cheap buy. So maybe you look at that and you say, look, for $500 I can spread this idea. Maybe it doesn't land, but it now becomes part of the conversation and among my constituents. I think that is a meaningful investment from the campaign point of view. So we're seeing that for sure in terms of like a sort of tactical ad placement and tactical ad buying.
The idea of being heard beyond just a vote on the ballot is one guarantee to all Americans through the First Amendment, allowing for peaceful assembly and petitioning of the government to redress grievances. This democratic right is one Americans have utilized to shape the country beyond the ballot box.
There's been an expansion of the ways that people can participate. You don't have to leave your house to sign a petition anymore. So you can petition the government, but we've been petitioning our leaders since before we were a nation. One of the objects in the exhibit here is a petition that was sent from the Virginia House of Burgesses in 1772 to the King of England. People take to the streets. The early days of our revolution were people taking to the streets. And of course, there's lobbying. These are all themes that are included in the exhibit, but the tools that people have used to do that have changed, but certainly not the motivation behind them.
Even though a lot of this material is familiar to me as a historian, I still find it a humbling experience to learn about this history, to be inspired by the stories of some of the people and groups who have pushed our nation to be better, to become that ever more perfect union. So I take great inspiration from the exhibition.
One of the things that this exhibit, I think, does very well is talk about how the evolution of citizenship has occurred over the 200+ year period in which we've undertaken this great experiment. And one of the important parts of that is understanding that not everyone who had citizenship rights were also making these decisions at the ballot box. That the residents, the people who lived here, even if they weren't able to vote, were still able to make a difference beyond the ballot box.
We talked earlier about who actually has the right to vote. As our democracy evolves, that definition of the people must continue to be defined, whether through naturalization, restoration of rights, or participation in our democratic society. We all have the opportunity to shape our country through citizenship.
In 2020, I had the honor of being able to take an 18-year-old to vote for the first time. And she was very enthusiastic about that. And I think that in part it was a really significant moment because she's our future, the future of our democracy. But it wasn't lost on her that she was participating at a critical time in our nation's history, proving that our democracy can endure.
We have first-time voters in this election in 2022. I just got my citizenship. I'm here to vote. I moved to the area. I want to vote for the candidates in the bond referendums. We applaud, we clap. We have same-day voter registration now. We've registered 10 voters since the books closed. These are people that would have been turned away on election day, but they just moved in here and they want to vote for their local offices.
Voters have certainly gotten more engaged with that. They are motivated to participate, whether they're working for the political parties or they're handing out sample ballots. They're also signing up to be officers of election so that they can understand what is happening in the election process, which we encourage. If we have folks that want to know more, we want them to be a part of serving the community and learning how the election is really run.
These citizenship classes, so they're called Becoming Citizens, and we are going to offer these in perpetuity in the future. So we hold one kind of semester in the fall and then another one in the spring. It's an 8-week course, and I really want to emphasize that it's 100% free. So we provide all the study material, we provide snacks, and students come and they don't have to pay anything.
The actual acts of citizenship are well beyond just voting once every 4, 2, or, as in Virginia, every single year. It is beyond the ballot box. It is how we interact with each other every single day. It's how we interact with our representatives by sending letters, writing petitions, by protesting. By gathering together, we engage in the civic process, in the democratic experiment. And that exists through our voting methods and in how we choose to perpetuate a system by engaging in it on a daily basis.
Before we sign off from the Virginia Museum of History and Culture, we want to say a big thanks to our friends here for being so accommodating and allowing us to showcase this exhibit during election coverage. The exhibit is up through December 31st, and we hope you'll make it out to experience it. I'm Matt Pachilli, and so long from the Virginia Museum of History and Culture.